Dogworks Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dog Works. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com. You can support this podcast on patreon.com/First Paw Media.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by First Paw Coffee Company, specializing in private label premium blend coffee. If you're serious about coffee, you should check it out. First Paw Coffee's passion is high-quality, small-batch roasted coffee. They take the extra time to taste and get everything perfect before they release new blends. They aim to bring you a cup of happiness each time you pour yourself some coffee. Find out more at ak.dog/free and enter for a chance to win some First Paw Coffee prizes, a book from our collection, and tote bag. One winner will be selected at random each month. That's ak.dog/free.
Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Robert Forto, and you're listening to our daily coverage of the 2021 Iditarod on KVRF 89.7 in the Mat-Su Valley. RadioFreePalmer.org is our live streaming site. You can find all of our episodes over on dogworksradio.com. Be sure to check us out on social media by searching Dogworks Radio. And today I'm joined by my two co-hosts for this year. We have Alex Stein calling in from California and Tony Ryder calling in from Kenai, Alaska. Tony, how's it going this evening?
Pretty good.
Well, thank you for joining us. And Alex, how's it going tonight?
It's going great. You know, we had the start this afternoon, and because there was no ceremonial start, it's just one start. And we have all of the teams are out on the trail right now. It's a little bit early for us to really say what's going on there, but I am finally starting to get excited about Iditarod. It took a while this year.
Yeah, it is getting exciting. And, you know, we held our breath for almost a year now thinking about what Iditarod's going to lay out. So I'm interested to really kick this off. You have a very quick update before we jump into tonight's show. One of the mushers had to withdraw. Is that right?
Yeah, Sean Williams withdrew before the start. So either late last night or early this morning, withdrew. And I don't have any solid information about what happened other than he said that it was a family health problem that was not COVID-19. Well,
that's good to know that it isn't too serious, hopefully, if it's not COVID. That's serious for everybody nowadays. So, Alex and Tony, I understand that you guys watched the start. We always like to say restart, but this was the actual start of the race today down in Deshka Landing. Tony, what do you think about the format that they had going on? It looked a lot different without a lot of fans. You know, everybody lined up there along the lake and all of that hubbub and party atmosphere. What do you think about the start there this afternoon?
You know, I was really actually impressed. They did have a few people that came out, even though they, had asked people to stay away. Of course, the locals, you're not going to be able to get all Alaskans to stay away from the biggest sporting event of the year. But everyone seemed really, really good about, just minding their distance. A lot of the people that were involved, everyone involved with the actual race, they had masks. They were doing their best, I think, to keep with the COVID mitigation. So I was actually pretty impressed and very sad that I wasn't there, but very glad that we've started the race at all. So.
Right. And Alex, one thing that was brought to my attention, which I guess we can jump right into a little bit of a discussion about. Last night we talked about the race being a camping race, meaning most of the teams will camp out along the trail. And it's my understanding that only a couple of mushers, Jesse Royer and Ramey Smith in particular, were the only ones that didn't have the trail dragger type sleds, and that's to hold the extra gear, and it looks like a little bit of a kind of like a caboose on the back of your sled. I know you guys were watching it online. Is that the case? And what did everybody's sleds look like? Did they look like they were packed to the gills? They call it the rookie bump.
You know, Tony, maybe you can speak to this a little. I didn't notice particularly that the sleds looked all that different. It was a little bit harder to see because of the different location and some of the camera angles. We saw a lot of the dogs, and we saw a lot of the mushers coming up to the camera location, but I don't think we saw a lot of views that really showed us the sleds very well.
Yeah, it definitely was more about the mushers and the dogs, which I guess it should be. But yeah, you kind of want to see the difference. The only sled that really stood out to me was the last musher, Victoria Hardwick, because her sled looked packed to the gills. Like, it was overflowing. It looks like when I'm going on vacation and my suitcase is just loaded. So that was the only one that really stood out. Everybody else had the cargo sled, the caboose in the back, those that you could see. So not too different, which was kind of surprising. But yeah, Victoria's was the one that stood out. It was bright yellow and huge.
And one other thing about the kickoff there, I'm looking at the standings right now, and of course we're only 3 or 4 hours in as we tape at 8 o'clock. Everybody started with 14 dogs, which is now the limit. Just a few years ago, they changed the rules from 16 to 14, but everybody has 14. Alex, are you at all surprised by that with the shorter race, the different style of race that it is? What do you think about the dog teams that went out?
The dog teams I saw all looked really, really good. And that's not unusual. The dogs almost always look great at the start. But these dogs, they look particularly good, I thought, this year. And it doesn't surprise me, from just from a strategy point of view, that people would take 14 dogs, because as longtime fans know, you can't add dogs. You can leave dogs and have them. You can drop dogs at checkpoints and have them returned to Anchorage, but you can't add any dogs. So, you I think want to have the maximum dog power that you can, thinking that probably there's going to be dogs that will be tired, dogs that are not having a good time, or dogs that maybe have some sort of minor injuries that you would need to leave at one of the checkpoints.
So everybody looked good going out. Tony, about today's coverage as you guys were watching it, what feed were you guys watching? Was it one of the news channels or Iditarod itself?
Alaska News Source, which is the combined news of KTVA and KTUU. They actually put their live feed on Facebook, so that made it easy for us to do the watch party or whatever that we were doing. So we just used that. So I guess the KTUU feed was the one, but I guess it was the same feed that Insider was also using, because they had the Insider crew with them. So it was actually pretty good. It was your standard start, nothing too different about it. I don't normally watch the coverage of the start because I'm normally at the start, but it was pretty good. They gave a lot of information and some good interviews with the teams as they were waiting to let them go out. So,
and
one thing I noticed this year that was a little bit different was that rather than just having the commentators basically read or sort of paraphrase the bios of the mushers, they actually had little clips of almost all of the mushers before they would go out, and that it was great just seeing and hearing these people in their own words and their own voices.
You mean on video? They had video clips that they added on,
right?
So Alex,
Yeah, exactly.
Tony brought up a good point where she's usually at the start, so she doesn't see this insider type coverage, at least on the normal restart start. But unless you're up in Alaska, Alex, you typically watch the start this way. Was it any different? Did they have the big boom camera? Did they have a different reporting style? Was there kind of this air of concern because of COVID? What was the overall production like, Alex, compared to normal years?
Well, the biggest difference was that there were a lot fewer people who were there, and the people who were there were, as Tony said, seemed to be observing all of the COVID protocols, and they were wearing masks, and people were generally being socially distanced as much as you can do that with bringing a dog team up to the starting line. They really, at the very start, they pretty much kept everyone away except for the handlers, the musher, and the dogs as they were going out. And then they would bring the next person down. So it looked a little bit different in that respect. And although there were people there, sort of further down from the very beginning, the very start, there were, what I could see, it looked like there were maybe about 40 or 50 people near the start, as opposed to normal years on Willow Lake, you'll have probably a couple thousand people lining the chute as it goes across the lake.
So, Tony, you had mentioned that it was the normal insider crew, and those guys have been doing it for a long time, that sort of setup that they have. What was the big story that they talked about today? Did they have one? Did they have a theme that they sort of set up for their coverage? Again, I don't usually watch the start like this because I'm typically there in person.
Yeah, it seemed to be just that they were having the race at all, that they focused quite a bit on COVID. I think they started out the whole show with a brief interlude on the honorary musher this year is actually all of the mushers from the Serum Run, I think, is who Iditarod is honoring this year. So they did a little clip about that. And then they talked a lot about COVID. But I think the big story they ended with, again, was Allie Zirkel's final year. And I think even Bruce Lee was giving Greg Heister a hard time because she's apparently one of Greg's favorite mushers. And how, sad it was that this end of an era is coming to a head in just about a week's time. And so they even did, I think, a little bit of an interview, I think, after everything, where they talked to all the different mushers about how they felt about Allie leaving. So it was kind of an emotional bit, but I think that's what they talked about most of. It's kind of all a blur because I was just watching the dogs and then whining that I wasn't there. So,
Alex, did you catch up on something other than what Tony had heard?
No, that was pretty much it. I think there were a lot of people, including some of the insider folks, who are just a little bit in awe of the fact that the race is going on at all. And so it is a testament to all of these people and to the ITC that they were able to figure out a way to do this. And, hopefully it will be safe and there won't be any issues. But I was thinking that since I've been really seriously following the Iditarod, which is going on about 20 years now, it seems like every couple of years there's this feeling that the generations are changing and the new blood is coming in, and it really does feel like that this year with Allie retiring, with Jeff King not being there, not being in the race. It's funny because some of the people that I still think of as being like the young Turks, like Dallas Seavey, is not that young. Dallas Seavey is, I think, 34 or 35 at this point. So there's definitely a bit of a generational change going on. And honestly, I think that's a good thing.
You know, I do too. And I was thinking this afternoon about bringing up some of our old coverage. And I know we've done this for the last 10 years, but maybe dropping some bonus episodes of some of the old coverage that we did and some of the stories that we told, and just kind of releasing those along with this. I think that would be pretty cool for our listeners, because it truly is a time capsule. And I know Tony said she always preps for Iditarod by watching the old videos. She said she was watching a video from, I believe, 1987. And yeah, this is going on. This is the 49th year of Iditarod. Next year is the big 50-year anniversary. So it's been around a long time. But I'm looking right now at the leaderboard. There are a heck of a lot of different names on there in the last 4 or 5 years than we're used to. Of course, there's a lot of the old-time veterans there, but man, it sure is different from when we went from 2015 to 2000 now, isn't it, Alex?
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, I'm looking right now, and one of the things about this race that is a little bit different is a lot of the comms work that would have been done on site is being done remotely. And one of the things I think that's going to mean is that the standings in Iditarod.com are going to be really slow to update. And I'm looking at them now, and they don't have anybody into Yetna, and almost all of the teams are past Yetna at this point, looking at it on the GPS. So just briefly, at the front right now, as we're recording this, Ryan Reddington, Gunnar Johnson, Nick Pettit, Jeff Dieter, Dennis Kananowicz, I'm going to say. I had to take a deep breath in to do that. Pete Kaiser, Richie Deal. So, it's a lot of people that you would expect to see toward the front. But again, as you said, we're only a few hours into this, so that does not yet really mean a whole lot.
And for folks that may not know the logistics of a sled dog race, they leave every 2 minutes. So the first musher left at 2 p.m. The last musher, 40, I guess that'll be 46. So it would be 92 minutes later. So an hour and a half later from the first musher that went out. So that first musher, that bib number 2, is about halfway to Yetna. It's about a 3-hour or so run from Deshka Landing on a normal year. At least that's what I can do it in. They're about halfway there. So that start is a big wide gap between those guys, and it doesn't necessarily mean, of course, that that first person that's in first place right now is going to, kind of take the cake, as they say. Alex, before we talk a little bit about the checkpoints coming up in the next 24 hours or so, this is something I'm really intrigued about. I don't know if you guys know anything new or not, but the last few years, the coverage has been changing a little bit in terms of the folks at Krill and that and whatnot. Are the trackers or anything at all different this year than they have in the past? Either Alex or Tony can answer.
I think it's. Oh,
go ahead.
I think it's the same as last year, which is kind of a conglomeration of what Iditarod had in the past and what Krill Pet has brought to the table. It's not exactly what we see Krill Pet using on their own website, but it is a different system than what we see with the other races with track leaders.
Yeah, they have
for like the Yukon Quest and stuff.
They have their own proprietary setup, and it's very, very unique compared to some of those other dots on the screen. And that's how a lot of people follow the race, whether it's folks like Alex that are up all night long for the next week and a half, or those guys that are constantly hitting refresh at the office tomorrow. And I guess most of us still aren't at the office, so I guess there will be a lot of refreshing going on during these Zoom meetings that everybody's still having to take part in. And I guess that's one way to pass the time. It's the new way of playing solitaire at the office, isn't it, Alex?
Yeah, it really is. And, rather than people doing this at the office, now they're doing it from home.
Right.
So I'm all in favor of that.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit, Alex, about the next 24 hours or so. You had mentioned that a lot of the mushers are passing the first checkpoint yet in a station. What's happening in the next 24 hours as the race continues?
Yeah, so the next checkpoint, and the leaders are either there or almost there, is Skwetna. And then after that, it's another 40 miles or so to Finger Lake. And then at 30 miles past that, to Rainy Pass. And then another 35 miles or so to Roan. So I'm not sure we'll see anybody in Roan tomorrow night, but we should see a bunch of teams in Finger Lake and Rainy Pass, I would imagine. It's a little bit different this year because the checkpoints are not in the exact places that they were. So we haven't really seen, in some cases, the checkpoints will be outside of the villages instead of at the buildings where they are every other year. So I think it's going to be also perhaps a little bit more confusing for people looking at the trackers if they see a bunch of teams that are resting at a place that doesn't quite seem like it's the checkpoint, but is near the checkpoint, then that's probably where the checkpoint has been moved to.
Right. Tony, have you heard anything, whether through Iditarod or the rumblings on social media, about the trail conditions this year? What are they looking at as they head down the trail?
Well, I actually just watched a live update from Insider right before we started recording. And apparently with the warm temperatures of the day, but the very cool evenings, I guess it was -7 when they all started showing up at Dushka this morning. But the trail, according to Bruce Lee, is hard pack trail. So it's been really fast. The teams are running at a really nice clip right now if you just look at the GPS and monitor their speed. So I assume that it's going to probably be that way for the next little while. The only other thing that I've heard is going into the Rainy Pass area on through Roan, there was a lot of overflow in the gorge and the surrounding area. So that's where I'm most interested to see how that has changed since the Iditarod Trail Invitational, which is the bike, walk, ski race that happened this last week. It'll just be interesting to see how the trails held up in the last week.
And it will be really interesting to see how it is coming back when you have 46 dog teams times 14. I have no idea what the math is, but well over, I would say, 700 dogs or so, if my calculations are right. Maybe it's 600 or so. So that's a heck of a lot of dogs, a heck of a lot of sleds. And normally in a normal year, as they're going through some of those mountain trails, they get that rut in, and you're just pretty much like a slalom. You're running down that rut as they go, especially those back of the pack mushers. But now they'll be doing it on both sides, so it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Alex, before we jump over into our Musher Profile of the evening. Do you have anything else that you would like to bring up here on our first day of the Iditarod?
Just that it was really fun. Tony and I hosted a watch party on Facebook for the start, and Tony was able to get all of the technical issues sorted out, and it was really fun. And I think at one point we had close to 60 people watching this and commenting with us. So that was great.
Yeah, I think that's the wave of the future. Everybody is becoming Facebook Live experts, and I guess that's how we're doing things these days. Tony, do you have anything else you would like to mention before we jump over to our Musher Profile?
Well, I would just, if people are jumping on to Iditarod.com, like Alex said, it's going to be slower going, looking at the stuff, because everything is so remote, being done remote, just like we've done all year with work. But I've also noticed that Insider is having their first day technical glitches. Like right now, Ryan Reddington is showing as finished on the GPS. So, I mean, unless he's really speedy, I don't think that's true. So, just it's so early in the race that you don't actually have to sit and stare at the GPS. I know that's a foreign concept to a lot of us. I do not practice what I preach. But the first day, it's all everybody just shaking out from the front of the pack to the back of the pack. So.
Right. So one other thing, Tony, before we jump into our Musher Profile, and I'm asking you this because you came up with that list that we posted on our show notes last night. And this is going to put you on the spot a little bit, but who do you think has the best coverage on their Facebook page? I know typically it's family and friends that are helping them out. Who does the best job, you think, with not only updating their kennel, but sort of the goings-on about the Iditarod itself?
Well, normally I would say it would be Danny Seavey, but he's technically not with a Musher this year because he's normally reporting for Mitch. But I assume he's going to be blogging. As far as who's got ahead of things right now, it might be Nicholas Petit, just because his handlers, they were doing live feeds this morning. They are keeping fans abreast of what's going on with the team. Matt Hall's got a really good, solid Facebook person. I don't know who's running it necessarily, but they're also doing that. And then Christy and Anna have a blog this year, and they've already been pretty active. It might also be Allie Zirkel's team. They're also very, very good. Most of their stuff is on their website, not on their social media, though.
Very good. All right, Alex, it's our first Musher Profile of the evening. Who do we have, and what do you got?
So our Musher Profile this evening is Matt Thaler. This is his 10th Iditarod. His best finish was 13th in 2018. He has 3 top 20 finishes. Matt's originally from Ohio. He spent the summer of 2006 working for a sled dog tour company in Alaska, then went back to school, graduated in 2007, moved to Alaska full-time in 2008, and worked as a handler for first Matt Hayadasha and then for Martin Boozer. He started his own kennel in Willow, which he named 17th Dog, which is a throwback to the old days when there were 16 dogs on an Iditarod team. Now it's 14, but he hasn't renamed his kennel. And during the summers, he works as a manager for the Alaska Icefield Expeditions Company. He met his wife, Liz, who is a reporter, in 2018, and she was working primarily as a political reporter up here in Alaska, and then had a chance to go out on the trail. Wasn't really all that familiar with sled dogs and racing, but of course, who could resist the chance to go up the trail and report on it. And then they met during the race, and Matt asked her out shortly after the finish, invited her to have coffee with him, and then he brought 3 of his dogs with him to his first date because he wanted to make it clear who he was and what was important to him and how important dogs and being a musher were. Last year, he finished second in the Cusco 300, and he was carrying an engagement ring with him the entire time and proposed to Liz at the finish line of the Cusco. She said yes. They were married in an outdoor ceremony in Willow, and the wedding was officiated and performed by Martin Boozer because, as I know personally, in Alaska, any adult resident of the state can be named as a temporary marriage commissioner to perform a wedding. And also in the wedding was Didi Genre was part of the ceremony. Liz had a dog of honor, and Matt had a best dog as part of the official wedding. And afterwards, she got into a sled bag, and on the sled, he got behind the runners, and they had 6 dogs who took them off and to the reception. Last year, people may remember that Matt was one of the 3 people who were waiting out a storm in White Mountain for about 20 hours. And then he and Sean Underwood and Tom Nolmeyer set out together, and just about 7 or 8 miles before they got to safety, they just ran into some really bad winds that were blowing up a tremendous amount of ocean water up onto the trail. He said that there were lagoons that were literally the size of basketball courts. And he tied trash bags to his feet and his legs to try to figure out a way to get through and find some dry trail that they could keep going, because he really wanted Sean, who had stepped in at the last minute a day before the start, to run in place of Jeff King, who had the medical emergency. And they wanted Sean to be able to get his belt buckle, but they just couldn't find a way around the water. So all 3 of them pushed their SOS buttons at the same time. And then a few hours later, a snow machiner came to check on them, and then they were rescued in epically exciting fashion by an Army Black Hawk helicopter, which came and took the 3 humans away, and then their dogs were taken by snow machine out to Nome. Following that, Iditarod rerouted the trail around that area to avoid the overflow, and that's why Martin Boozer and the so-called Elam 11 were able to get around that patch of trail by avoiding the area. After Matt came back from the race and was home in Willow last summer, he said, there are people dying from coronavirus, and there's real world stuff going on everywhere. My dogs are healthy. I'm healthy. I didn't finish a sled dog race. It's not the end of the world. Excellent stuff for sure. Real quickly, Tony, do you have any nuggets about Matt? I know that you've followed these guys forever on social media.
I think Alex pretty much covered it. Matt's very personable, not only in person, but he's also got a lot of great stuff on his social media. So he's one of those mushers. He's just one of those nice guys that a lot of people like to follow, because you do feel he has this sense of pride in his team, but he also just really, really loves what he does. It's no surprise that he and Martin Boozer are really close, and that he learned quite a bit. You can kind of see the influence that Martin had in Matt's early career. So yeah, he's just one of the mushers you want to root for, because you always root for the nice guy. So
Yeah, and as I mentioned last night, just a real quick story about Matt. He is one of my trail neighbors. He lives on the other side of what they call Deception Swamp. And I tell you what, I've seen him on the trail here probably more than anybody in our little neighborhood of mushers, and he's always a tremendously nice guy. He'll go out of his way to help you out if you're having troubles or if you're stuck, or he always takes a second to stop and say hello. He's just one of those guys that you would like to root for, and that's why he's in my top 3 this year. I hope he does very well, and I think it's his time coming for him to do very well in Iditarod for sure. So that is about it. Alex, what's happening tomorrow on the show?
So I'm not really sure what will happen. It sort of depends on what people do tonight. But I know from having done this with you for a bunch of years that there's always something that happens. And I think by tomorrow, we'll begin to get a clearer idea of who the rabbits are who might be trying to jump ahead and make a lot of progress really quickly. I think it's going to be starting to get clear who the back of the packers will be. And then, I'm just looking forward to seeing how this race shakes out.
Very good. I know we are definitely out of time, so I'm going to end it here. On behalf of my co-hosts, Tony Ryder and Alex Stein, this is Robert Forto for the 2021 coverage of the Iditarod here on Dogworks Radio. Be sure to check us out over on social media at Dogworks Radio, and you can hear all of our episodes over on dogworksradio.com. We will see you guys next time. Goodbye.
Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.